Okay, good evening, everyone. We're towards the end of the chapter that is discussing very interesting situations of non-religious people with the regarding Shabbat, various different circumstances that come up. Hopefully, this should be almost the last one. We'll try to finish this week the chapter so that Lei spoke about maybe advertising a series, like a 6-week series on Borer, on separating on Shabbat, which I think would be, you could even advertise this, the most relevant and most often dealt with on Shabbat out of all the other melachot of Shabbat. Obviously, we don't talk about people who cook or things of that sort, but sorting and separating is something that comes up very frequently, and people don't know well enough the halachot and could be transgressing the right level malach on Shabbat. So it's really important to study the details of it. Okay.
Thank you. Is this going to be from next week?
I believe so. Let's see how we finish off this week, today meaning, and we'll see. I believe so. I believe as of next week, we should start Borer. Even if we don't completely finish this chapter, we'll have done most of it. So I think it's safe enough to advertise for next week. Yes. Zat Hashem. Okay, so.
Can I start with a question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I don't remember what the rule was. If you're in someone else's home and you open the fridge and you realize the light is on, what do you do with the door afterwards? Just leave it?
I don't know if you heard the question. Repeat the question. If you are at someone else's home and you open the refrigerator door and you realize the light goes on, what do you do with the door? So first of all, we mentioned several times that you can fetch the food and enjoy the food, because the malacha that was transgressed by opening the fridge doors of turning on the light, that has no effect on the food itself. It didn't change anything in the food itself, and it didn't. The light isn't what enabled you to reach the food. It's the door that did. So it's two separate issues. Therefore, it's okay. Something away. Okay. Then you see the fridge.
Naturally swing shut. Mine, if you open it, unless you open it all the way, if you open it a little bit, it's heavy, and it swings shut.
Swings shut.
This one was like a more fancy one.
It didn't
want to shut.
Okay, so what do you do with the door once it's open and you see the light turned on? Really, you can't. Not only can you not help it shut closed, you can't cause it to shut closed. You can't even allow it to shut closed. Even if you just leave and it closes on it shuts itself, it closes on its own, it's still part of your action because it's due to the fact that you opened it. That was by mistake, of course, unintentionally you caused the light got turned on, but when you allow it to close, it's part of at least bigrama, but even maybe it's a direct action because yes, I'm just recalling now. The Chasam Sofer, one of the greatest poskim on Ashkenazic, the Ashkenazic poskim of the past 300 years or so, he holds that Hasarata Monea is considered grama, meaning the fact that the door would like to shut itself closed, but you're holding on to it. When you let go, it shuts itself closed, that's considered grama. Because you're just removing the blocking that blocks the artifact, the item, the thing that we're talking about. By removing your hand, you allow it to close itself. That's called grama. But most poskim don't even agree with the Chasam Sofer. They hold that it's considered an action, a direct action. Sarata monea is what allowed the fact that you removed the blocking of the actual item to do the malacha is considered as if you did the malachas directly. So most poskim wouldn't even hold that it's grama, and even if you hold a chasam sofer, so grama is still not allowed on Shabbat, just it becomes rabbinical. Rabbinic not allowed. So in any case, you should not let go of the door, and definitely not push it sort of that it should close on Shabbat. What do you do then? Normally in our homes, if that happens in our house, we place like a towel around the door so it doesn't shut closed. The entire Shabbat is left a little open, and then the light doesn't go off. If you're in someone else's home, that's very tricky, because if you do that, that would be a big insult, because they obviously don't care so much about the light.
Realize or whatever, but I was standing there in the moment thinking,
what do I do now?
Someone else is going to close it, and then maybe they'll even do it with force. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, and
not just leave it and let it close on its own.
I've actually got a secondary question, which is, I'm assuming like we can't really eat there again.
No, so it depends. If they had forgotten to do the fix the.
It's so awkward and uncomfortable, and it's like everything that Shabbos meals together shouldn't be.
Right.
You know, like to raise it is just super uncomfortable.
Of course.
Even with like a close friend or even a family member, right? To raise it.
No, during the meal for sure not. Maybe the following day or a few days later, sort of maybe even bring it up as something that you just learned. Right. You know, I learned about the refrigerator door with the light. Maybe they'll get the hint.
Is it possible that there are fridges that the light stays on the whole time and the door doesn't affect when it's activated? Maybe I'm like sort of judging them that they've done something wrong, and maybe it's on 24 hours
permanently. Yeah. Is there such a thing? I don't know.
My Shabbos setting turns it off.
Right.
Maybe their Shabbos setting keeps it on.
Keeps it on 24 hours. That's interesting. Although it wouldn't make sense to me. Maybe yes, because they would light the light on when they open the refrigerator door. Because on the other hand, it's shut most of the hours on Shabbat.
Because I thought maybe that's
so it's a waste of electricity.
Like, notice that your light was on. I think they might be asking how you manage that setting, because I'd love my fridge light to stay on as well.
That's a good idea. Then the answer is no, we didn't. We don't care for it, or we don't take care of it. It's problematic.
Right.
Or they tell you, "Whoops, we forgot that Shabbat," which is also good. That's a good answer, because then you know they're aware of it and they care for Chod Shabbat. If they don't care for the Chod Shabbat, that's how we spoke last week, or 2 weeks ago, that it's problematic to eat in such homes, because who knows what else they do. Not only violation of Shabbat, what else they do regarding the kashrus and the issues are involved with eating.
Not eating there again is not the end of the world. But it's not a situation. I can see a situation like that. You know, they're
reoccurring different homes.
Well, if it's new people that you're not quite sure, I have every reason to believe that they are Shabbos keeping. Other sides of their lifestyle, they don't appear to be not religious people. However, everyone has chinks in their ability to do everything. So
of course. Although lighting is something that religious Jews are very, very much aware of. It's not something that's unknown to people. So hopefully they're the type that they have such a fridge that light stays on, or they just forgot to do it that Shabbat.
Right. If that situation arose again, what's the thing to do?
Just what to do then?
Hope that someone else realizes the fridge door is open, or I don't want to break their fridge.
Of course.
It stays open the whole of Shabbat. So some fridges, if you leave them open for too long, then an alarm goes off.
It goes beep. It beeps.
So then, I'm making it. It's like either way, I'm making it worse, because I'm activating that beeping to start by not shutting. It's like it's a minefield.
Wow! That's so difficult. Wow.
I did ask a question about this once before, when it happened many years ago. I said that people had invited us back, and I was like refusing and sort of making complicated
excuses.
My friend's husband is a rabbi in England, and he suggested, why don't you invite the family to you, and get your husband to make a long Dvar Torah
to speak about these issues. Yeah. No, that was a good idea on your part to ask them, how do you manage the light? Remains on the whole Shabbat. And if they say we forgot, they'll probably get out of it by saying we forgot to deal with it that Shabbat, but we're not sure if that's true. But regarding what to do with the fridge door, you would have to, there's no other choice. You would have to leave it open.
Right.
If it's a type door that shuts itself, you would even have to put a towel around the door or bring a chair to do it through to stop it from closing. Yeah, no other way out. Because
can you do it with like a shinui? Does that make it less bad? A Jew in that house is going to close the door eventually.
Right, but that's not your fault anymore.
Right.
It's they do what they do, especially if you place a towel over the door. So if they remove the towel, it's definitely their action, not yours. You saved the day, and they did the wrong thing. To close with a shinui, make it trade or abanan. You should say for tzara gadol, of course. That could be an option. Although poskim aren't so keen about allowing electricity specifically by two shinuim. We said this many times because they're afraid that we start turning on and off all the lights and all the AC, and it makes it very, the atmosphere of Shabbat that gets desecrated. You could use this situation to sort of bring up, discuss the issue, because if you say, "Whoops, I just saw the light in the fridge," someone probably has to make a joke out of it. Someone forgot to do his task before Shabbat, kind of like a joking way.
Yeah.
And then either or they tell you that it's on permanently, and then no problem, you shut the door. They say to you, "Oh, you're right. Wow, we didn't notice," which is probably going to be if they neglected it on purpose, you're probably going to say something like that. So then you could go ahead and say, "Well, I have the solution now," and that is to wrap the towel around, something like that, like exclaim on it, like, "Wow, just found out that we left the light on. Who's in charge here?" Or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Otherwise, very problematic to shut the door.
I mean, I just won't offer to clear up in that way again, because it was so uncomfortable.
Right.
And it's not necessary. True. She didn't say to me, "Please put this in the fridge."
In the fridge,
just
right.
After the meal,
it's usually the balabasta puts back in the fridge.
Right. I was just trying to be helpful.
Right.
So that's a lesson for me. I just will not be going into other people's fridges.
That's true.
Again.
Exactly.
It's a minefield.
Exactly. That's a good lesson, not to go into people's fridges. Right. I think some people, unless she asks you to do so, but otherwise, some people don't like others seeing what's going on in their fridge. Maybe out of order.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good lesson also. Okay, so let's continue with the discussions here. The next case would be, it doesn't have to be specifically this exact case, but the idea behind it is that if a non-religious Jew asks for your help regarding an object that if you supply that help, it will allow him to be Mechal Shabbos with the object. It's not selling him the object, it's his own. But by doing something he asks for your assistance, that will allow him to then use it all week long, including Shabbat. Let's give the case, the specific situation we're talking about. A person who owns a car, the non-religious person owns a car, but for tax purposes, he would like to switch ownership over the car and to make you as the owner, as if, or for him not to pay taxes on the expense of the car. So all you're doing is signing almost like a fake document saying that you purchased the car, but really it remains his. You don't pay him anything for it. It's just yours, technically speaking, officially, but really it's his to use, and he uses it for himself all week, including Shabbat. But here in this case, you've enabled him to continue using the car, or at least comfortably, including Shabbat. So should you offer your help or not? So the answer is as following. The fact that you officially own the car, that's not an issue on its own, because we said several times, Shvitat Kelim is only an issue according to Beit Shammai. The fact that a person owns something and that item works on Shabbat, that's not an issue that we have to care about, because we don't hold like Beit Shammai, who hold that you mustn't allow anything to work on Shabbat. anything that you own mustn't do malacha on Shabbat, even if you don't activate it on Shabbat. The object itself must rest. We don't hold that way. We hold only shvitat be'ema, which the Torah says explicitly in the Seres of Dibros. So your animals cannot work on Shabbat, meaning do anything that's a violation of Shabbat. But your animate objects can work on Shabbat. So from that point of view, we don't mind that you own the car and the car is now riding on Shabbat. That's not an issue. But it's an obvious situation of Mesayah Lidei Avra Avera. It may not be Lifnei Iver, which is a deraita level, that you're making someone stumble over a sinful action because you could always use someone else to do the same transaction, fake transaction, do it with someone else. So it's not Lifnei Iver deraita. That's only a case where you're the only one that can assist him and then enable him to transgress the sin. But even if you're not the only one, it's called Mesayeh Devre Avera. You're helping him be sinful by using the car in Shabbat. So, but an important but, and that is, this is only true if you know definitely that he's going to ride the car in Shabbat. Which means you know that he doesn't use, doesn't mean that every specific Shabbat he's going to use it. It means normally he goes to the beach, he goes to see friends, he goes to plays, all kinds of things like that. That's called definite. But if it's someone that rarely uses or barely uses the car in Shabbat, he's a person who likes to rest, even though he's not religious, he doesn't like going out and all the commotion, he likes resting at home for Shabbat, then you can assist him with this transaction, because Safek Lifnei Iver says the Ritva that we're not obligated to refrain from. Safek Lifnei Iver, Safek Mesayeh Devre Avera, we give them the benefit of the doubt and we don't have to assist him. But otherwise, yes. Now, one more point that's just very crucial here. And this sort of boomerangs at us by the way we perceive Chilonim in our days. There is a Shach. Shach is one of the main commentators on Shulchan Aruch in Yoredea, Kuf Nun Zayin, 157. The Shach says there that there's no issue of Mesayeh Devre Avera to a Mumar, to a Jew that rejects religion, that denies Hashem. There's no problem of helping him transgress any Isser, any prohibited action, because it's almost like Haliteu LaRasha v'Yamot. He's anyway a Rasha, a wicked person. He's not believing and following Torah mitzvos, so let him stumble more. We don't care. That's the approach of the Shach. But of course, obviously for us, we don't perceive the Chilonim that way. We hold that they are Tinokot Shenishmu, or even actually this week's Parsha, I just realized, the end of Parsha Shlach speaks about Kehal Shogeg, a community, a collective of people who are shogeg on Torah mitzvos. The Ramban there explains, what are we talking about? How can there be a whole collective, a whole community, a whole town, that they are all shogeg on mitzvos? The answer, says the Ramban, and it's amazing how he lists various types of understandings of ideologies of groups of Jews, of communities. The ideologies of such that the Torah mitzvahs were only given in the past and they no longer are relevant, or they're only given in Chutz La'aretz and not in Eretz Yisrael, or in Eretz Yisrael, not in Chutz La'aretz, all kinds of such ideologies, which are all wrong. But that's how a whole collective can possibly be shogeg. And the Torah says on this case, Kehal Shogeg, that they are only shogeg. They're not considered mezi. They're not considered that they are wicked people. They have to bring a sacrifice of chatat, but they're not mumar. They're not considered in denial of Torah mitzvahs, because that's their ideology caused them to refrain from Torah mitzvahs. Anyhow, so we don't consider the Chilonim in our days as mumarim, and therefore we cannot use the Shach's opinion to enable us to do this type of business with a Chiloni, knowing that he's going to use the car to violate Shabbat. We still mustn't allow him to stumble, even though he would anyway stumble over Torah mitzvahs, no question, because he's not religious. But any additional assistance, any additional violation by our assistance is wrong. So we mustn't, even though on the other hand, we're sort of a little bit acting meaningfully again towards him because we're not going to help him do this transaction. But which, by the way, in any case, I'm not sure from the Dinei Mamonot point of view, the fact that he's trying to sneak away from paying taxes, it's not always also something that we should be part of. But that has to be checked, of course, legally, if it's something illegal or not. But that's another point that we shouldn't help him at if it's something illegal. Now, this is different. This case is different than a very common, very, very common situation where a person owns an apartment and they rent it out. Can one rent out their apartment, a religious family rent out their apartment to a non-religious family? We may think it's the same thing. Maybe it's not lifnei because they can find other apartments to rent, but it's miseret devrei avera. If we enable them to now live in our apartment, they take the apartment on a lease, they're going to violate so many prohibitions of Torah in the apartment. Shabbos, eating non-kosher, nida issues, lashon hara, whatever, you name it. There's so many things that they'll transgress in our apartment. So by us enabling them to live in our apartment, are we not assisting them, like the situation where we go through a transaction over the Chioni's car, a fake transaction just to help him get out of taxes, and then he's going to use the car in Shabbat, and due to us, he's able to run the car. There we said we mustn't do so. Is it any different to sign a contract with a non-religious family to take our apartment? The answer is that there is a difference. There is a difference, and most poskim allow renting out the apartment to a non-religious family, and the reason is based on the Maharsham, and if I recall correctly, it's also the Beit Yitzchak. These are two very big poskim of 150 years ago in Poland, in Galicia. They both hold that lifnei iver or mesayeh, which is one deraita, one derabbanan, but we're talking about the same general concept. They both hold that it's only true if the transgression of the violation of the Torah is immediate after your assistance, or if it's not immediate, it's the object itself that's causing the violation. Those are two conditions that we mustn't be involved in. So immediacy in these cases, both cases, the car and the apartment, is not true unless you rent out the car, unless you sign that contract to acquire the car, zif, right before Shabbat, and then he's going to use it immediately after on Shabbat. But if you sign it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, then it's not immediate. But it's the item itself. The car is the item itself, which is the Chil Shabbos involved. It's the object itself that transgression is used for. It's like passing over a bottle of wine to a Nazir. That's a famous example of lifnei iver. We mustn't pass a bottle of wine to the Nazir. Even if he won't drink from it immediately, he can drink from it another 2 days from now. But the fact that you've handed over a bottle of wine, that is the object he mustn't have. That's why it's not allowed. But in the apartment isn't the object itself that we transgress any halacha with. It's just that living within the apartment enables the person to do all kinds of things, and all kinds of things are the transgressions. That's once removed away from direct stumble, making someone stumble over. The logic behind it is that if it's not the specific object being used for the transgression, then really it's like free choice of the person to decide what he's going to do. Like in the apartment, he doesn't have to eat non-kosher. He doesn't have to buy the Shabbos. He doesn't have to do problematic issues of nidah. It's only his choice. So that's not our fault. But a car is used for driving. That's the main use of it. Almost nothing else can it be used for. So it's almost like knowing 100% that he's going to use it for driving, and knowing 100% that it's going to be on Shabbat, because it's a person normally driving on Shabbat. That's why it is a problem, whereas renting out the apartment would not be a problem. Okay, so that's for those two examples. One is the difference between the two. Next situation, if you're in a home of a Chiloni family, and they turn on a light, turn on the AC on Shabbat, and you're there. What do you do then? We mustn't enjoy from a melacha done by a Jew during Shabbat at least. Motzei Shabbat, we can, either immediately or within the time that it would take to do the non-permissible action, or we can enjoy Motzei Shabbat. What do we do on Shabbat? And even if they're considered shogeg, by doing so without having the knowledge and the belief to begin with of Shabbat, so if you consider them shogeg by the action they did, it's still problematic to enjoy during Shabbat. We would only allow after Shabbat. So the truth is, you should not enjoy and benefit the light or the AC that was turned on Shabbat. The light, you can't really help it besides not using the light for anything you could not have done without the light being turned on. You shouldn't read. You shouldn't search for something that without the light being turned, I would never be able to find it. Things that show that you're using the light, you mustn't do. But if you just stay in the room and talk to people or eat, even eating would be okay because, well, again, non-religious family, you wouldn't be eating that too many foods, but maybe bought foods. So to sit down and eat, you're okay because you could have done that even in the dark. It's never pitch black. There's always light from outside. Helps you see approximately what you're eating. But to read and to search for something, that you could not have done with the dim light coming from outside. So you pick and choose what to do that you're not benefiting from the light. How about the AC? What do you do there? You're enjoying the cool air. You can't help it. So if you're able to, and again, it could be very, very delicate to do such a thing, but if you can open the window, that would be great because then the effect of the AC shrinks and you're sort of showing by action that you're not interested in the air conditioning.
And sorry, about opening windows and things like that when the AC is on, because it's indirect, it's okay, especially in your own home, because obviously you're gonna, if the windows are well open, let's say the balcony door is open wide enough that it's going to kickstart the engine again, rather than, the temperature in the room is what controls. So right, if you are opening front door, exactly.
Right.
Is that okay on a general basis? We're not talking about somebody turning it on for you, but you put on a timer in your own home.
Yes. So it's fine. It's perfectly fine. First of all, if it's now currently working, and by opening the door or the window, you just extend the time it's going to work, that's definitely fine. We said always to extend the situation is totally fine. But even the case you spoke about when it's now off, and by opening the door or window, it brings in hot air, and it's going to turn on sooner than it would have if you hadn't opened the door to the window, that's still okay. That's what Shlomo Zalman's idea. We spoke about this that way back, you used to have these refrigerators that when the thermostat used to decide when the engine should start cooling off the air in the refrigerator. So when you open the door of the refrigerator, that caused the engine to begin sooner than it would have if you hadn't opened the door and you allowed it. Now, unlike those poskim who say you had to listen to the engine to see if it's working and only then open the refrigerator door. He said, no, it's okay to open because it's based on psik reisha and grama together. Psik reisha is the fact that you're not even interested in the engine working. You don't care less. But it's going to have to turn on sooner because of the hot air. So it's a lo mitkaven psik reisha. You're not intending for it to turn on. That's not your intention, but yet it has to happen. But that's still once removed from Deoraita and Grama. It doesn't happen immediately. It happens later on. It's not going to turn on the engine, the motor immediately. The motor is going to turn on in 5 minutes instead of 7 minutes. It's not immediate, so it's Grama. So we're talking about Psik Reish and Grama, and that's totally allowed. So yeah, that's fine.
If you go to someone's house who's not religious on Shabbat,
yeah,
air conditioning is on, but they didn't put it on because of you, it's just on. And you still have to try and find a way to avoid using it?
It depends. If the air conditioning is on because it was turned on before Shabbat, then obviously everything is fine.
No, it's definitely been put on Shabbat, but it
but it doesn't matter if it's for you or not. Because a Jew, that's true by a non-Jew. A non-Jew that does the Vali Shabbat for himself, you can benefit totally from it. If you would like to read and he turns on the light, you can read it. And that's in that same room. The window, right. So the next solution is, if you can't open a window, it's very weird to go into someone's home and open a window and they turn down the air conditioning. So, what's that?
You put on more clothes so that you're
maybe very hot. But that's also weird. That would seem very weird to the family there. So the next possible way, try to make your way to a different room, if possible. A room that the air conditioner is not turned on in. But again, that's only, you could say something like, air conditioning isn't something that I enjoy, let's move to a different room, something like that. It makes me allergic or makes me sneeze or things like that.
And I'll often turn it off.
So that's already turn it off, right. So that you stop them, of course, say, no, please don't. It's not what I meant. Let's move to a different room. They'll probably get the hint, but that's okay, it wasn't expensive. And the third option, after opening a window or moving to a different room, the third option is to stay in the room if you can't help it, because it's going to cause, besides weirdness, it can cause uncomfortable atmosphere, environment. So you could stay in the room as long as you're not positioning yourself right in front of the air, of the cool air, and so sort of really gaining the pleasure of it. If you stay away from it in the same room, so you're showing that you really are uncomfortable with using it, and that's called lo yefshar velo kamechaven. If a person is in a situation where he can't help himself, and plus he does not wish to enjoy, so the Gemara in Pesachim Kafei says that it's okay, and that's the Igros Moshe. Moshe Feinstein also asks that way, then that's okay. You can't help yourself, and you're not intending on using it. So you could stay in the room as long as you position yourself away from the direct cool air coming out of the air conditioner. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I know it's kind of not related, but related. I remember learning once that, like for Pikuach Nefesh, like you can, or if somebody is ill, and they need warmth or they need heat, or a lady that has just given birth, like there are some things that you can, like that we can do to, it might not be like pikuach nefesh, like they're gonna die, God forbid, but there are things that you can do to make somebody feel more comfortable. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? Is there something that... Yes. I'll tell you what you're talking about. Yes, I tell you what you're talking about. You're talking about Reish Ayin Tet Sif Dalet. The Shulchan Aruch says in 279, letter D, it says that Be'bkom Sha'aratzot in Kol Gadol, countries where it's extremely cold, one is allowed not to turn on ourselves on our own, but with a goy. Ask a goy to turn on the heating. There it's talking about extreme cold weather. You can ask a goy directly. We haven't gotten to the chapter of using a goy on Shabbat. When we get to that chapter, you'll see that it's very unique that you can tell a goy directly, please, even a furnace in extremely cold countries, you can ask the goy to directly to turn on the furnace so that you get heating. Why? Hakol cholim etzel tzina. The Shulchan Aruch says everyone is considered sick
when it's too cold, because you can get sick, severely sick. Pneumonia, and things of that sort. So the flu, to an extreme situation.
And does it work the other way around in the heat?
Yeah. So that the Minchat Yitzchak, the Rabbi Yitzchak Weiss, wrote a responsa. He lived around 30 years ago, quite recent. He was the Gaivid of the Eda Haredit. The Eda Haredit, one of the most extreme ultra-Orthodox communities. He was their rabbi. So he wrote a responsa called Minchat Yitzchak, and there he writes that same as in very extremely cold weather, you're allowed to ask a goy directly to turn on the furnace for you. Same is true in extreme hot weather, like here in Israel, could be in the heat of the summer, sharav. Then he allows by a goy to ask him directly to turn on the air conditioner. Yes, that's how it works. Because he says you can also get very sick from extreme hot weather, like dehydration. Dehydration if it's very hot, or severe headaches from the heat and all that. So yeah, so that's true, but that's talking about that. By the way, you don't need to get to the situation of a yoledet, a woman who gave birth, or a sickly person already. It's the idea, the concept, shakol cholim etzil tzina. It can turn everyone to be sick, become sick. That's how we allow by a goy. Otherwise, if there is a sickly person in the house, it depends the level of sickness he's in. There is cholesh yesh bo sakana, that's dangerous, that we do everything to save his life. Cholesh she'ein bo sakana, sakanat ivar, miktzat choli, and michush be'alma. We have 5 levels of sickness. Each level allows different things. We won't get into that right now, but in general, on most of these levels, we allow a double derabanan to help this person out by doing twice removed from deraita, 2 separate derabanan activities, so that it's twice removed from deraita. Usually, we're talking about either asking goy to do the action for us, bishinui, ask him to do something bishinui, or ask him to do something that's only rabbinically forbidden, and then it's twice the rabbanan. It's the rabbinically forbidden action by a goy, which is another rabbanan. That's allowed for most of these situations that I listed before, except for michush be'alma. Only if it's a slight headache or a slight stomach ache, then you don't do even that. Or a Jew can do a rabbinic transgression, bishinui. That's also okay, because we take the double derabanan again in that direction. Okay, so that's about benefiting from but this, all that we spoke about now is by using a non-Jew or a Jew that's doing a double derabanan for sickly people. Here we're talking about a chiloni home. No one's sick. It's not extremely hot, not extremely cold, and it's not a goy. So there's nothing to allow and to permit the enjoyment of the gaining benefit from what he did. Okay, here we have another situation which I think we've discussed in the past, and you ladies did not approve of this solution or prohibition actually. But I'll repeat it over again because repeating the book in this chapter we had done it in one of the previous chapters. I don't remember which that it connected to as well. I know it's very, very disturbing, very, very difficult, but I want to this time add another line about this. Situation is a non-religious family getting into their car on Shabbat, okay? It could be just the mother, just the father, and they need some help. They have a few children, and you happen to pass by. Maybe it's your neighbor, they know you, and they say, please could you help me get this child into the car seat on Shabbat. I think we spoke a few months ago about a situation of an elderly person who needs help getting into the car, helping them to get into the car on Shabbat. This is extremely, extremely difficult to cope with because on one hand, it's definitely Messiah de You're definitely helping. This is immediate because in a second they're going to start driving. And the additional weight that you're loading on the car creates a greater violation of Shabbat. And even if it wasn't for that, let's say it's a baby. A baby doesn't add any gasoline, burning of gasoline because of their weight. But it could be at least ziluta de Shabta, the atmosphere of Shabbat, the fact that you're acknowledging them driving on Shabbat and even assisting them to begin the journey. That desecrates the atmosphere of Shabbat, the ruach, the spirit of Shabbat. On the other hand, to refuse to help is also very, very difficult. They're going to say these religious Jews, they're good for nothing. They hate us. Who needs them? And cause real hatred there. So as we said many months ago, that you have to try your best to come up with some excuse like my back hurts or something of that sort, and I can't really help. Or I don't know, it's hard to even think of a good enough reason why we're not going to help this family unless you say directly, sorry, this is Shabbat, we're not telling you what to do, but for us, it's you're putting us into an uncomfortable position. We prefer not to be part of it. I don't know, to think of a way to get out of it. And by the way, the Rav Filmak adds in his book, even if it's, unfortunately, I would say, the person's own parents who aren't religious, and he's a chazar b'tshuva, or she's a chazar b'tshuva, they're asking for assistance, for help to do something that violates Shabbat. You mustn't listen to them because it says, Ish imo v'aviv tirau, ve'ed shabtatai tishmoru ani Hashem. Why did the Torah combine, this is a pasuk in Kedoshim, why did the Torah combine fearing your parents, aviv tirau, and keeping Shabbat? What's the connection? One pasuk says Rashi there on the spot, based on Chazal Nivamot, Baba Metzia, that this comes to teach us that even if we're supposed to listen to our parents, whatever they ask of us, we should help them, but not on account of Shabbatai Tishmoru. Keeping Shabbat, that's just an example. Any other sin, violations of Torah should not be done, even on account of disobeying our parents. We must disobey them because Hashem, and it ends off by saying, yes, Hashem, I'm on top of everyone. Hashem is on top of everyone, and therefore they all have to respect, your own parents have to respect me, and not you respect them against me. That's how the idea goes. So now I want to add something that I was involved in a little bit a few weeks ago. We had in Olari, we had a shloshim, unfortunately, very unfortunately, of Ronen Neuvert. Passed away a month or 2 months ago, very young, the age of 50, 51. Reminds me of blessed memory of Beller. 54, I believe he was. Very, very young, much too young, and such successful men and such good meaning people. Chabal de Avdin. Anyhow, so they had a shloshim event, and one of the speakers was Rav Ronen Neuvert's officer in the army when he served as a young fellow in the army. He came to eulogize for the shloshim, and I was deeply impressed with what he had to say. He's a Chiloni person in his mid-50s, maybe early 60s, I would say now. Very combat unit. Rav Ronen had served in the army with the Chel Hayam, the sea issues. So he spoke about the fact that he had many conversations with Ronen back then, was a young fellow in his 20s, many conversations about religion. And what came up, as this person explained, was that him as a Chiloni and Ronen as a Dati person, he complained. He complained to Ronen, how come the Chilonim have no say with regards to Judaism? everything is said by the religious Jews, everything that represents Judaism comes from the religious side, and nothing from the non-religious, as if we're cut out of Judaism, as if we're not Jews. And Ronen took that to heart, and according to this officer, these conversations changed Rav Ronen's entire course of life. He had meant to continue after the army, and he did this in the army itself. Computers. He was into technology, and he was very good at it. He meant to go into high tech. That was the course of his life. But when he heard this line and all the conversations he had with this person, he felt he had to do something about it. And then he changed the course of his life to go to learn Rabbanut, became a rabbi of several communities, and he was always reaching out to the Chiloni world to try not to make them religious. It wasn't his point. It was to try to connect with them and listen to them, hear what they have to say about Judaism. How do they perceive being Jewish? What does it mean to them? And see if we can give and take with them, which I think is a very beautiful and correct attitude. Why am I saying all this? Because this officer also mentioned that Rav Ronen actually was able to create many programs in this direction. And one of the things he mentioned was the fact that Rav Ronen established Beit Hillel, the organization Beit Hillel, with many rabbis and women, men discussing Torah. And the uniqueness of the organization is the willingness to listen to the Chilonim and to come out, and this he mentioned very specifically, come with Piskei Halacha, with halachos, that identify the change and the new type of course within the Jewish people, having the Chilonim also part of the Jewish nation, and to issue Piskei Halacha that speak in modern language and come up with modern solutions which change the previous halachic decisions of previous poskim. One of the examples he gave was the fact that Beit Hillel came out with the Psak Halacha that a religious person is allowed to eat by a non-religious family, providing they tell him that they used only kosher ingredients and that they kept the utensils kosher for this meal. That's a very, very, very lenient approach, liberal approach, that is not held by most poskim. But Beit Hillel came out with the Psak, and he was very pleased to show how Rav Ronen was part of all this making. I happened to bump into him a few minutes after the entire event had ended, and I told him how impressed I was with the way he spoke, and it came out of his heart. I felt it from his heart, and then he appreciated it, and he said we can be in touch and see what we can do together. I said definitely. It hasn't happened yet, but hopefully one time will happen. I did not say to him the following line. I didn't want it to turn a sort of put him on a down when he was so excited, and so was I with what he had to say. But my gut feeling inside is that one thing I defer to, I beg to disagree. The fact that we bend ourselves, bend backwards in order to connect to the Chilonim, I think that really cannot lead to anything. The Torah is what the Torah is. Halacha is what halacha is. True, halacha has to be flexible because no one in the world had expected that there's going to be such a thing like electricity in the world 200 years ago, 300 years ago, and organ transplants and all of that stuff. It's all very, very modern issues. We have to solve them with halachic tools. One thing we mustn't do, I believe, according to what I feel, we mustn't bend the halacha in order to make someone else pleased. If we remain strong in our way, yet, very much attentive, very much listening, very much appreciating others who are different than us, and let them stay the way they believe they should be. They too don't have to bend. When we're two strong poles that listen to each other, that can cause slowly the merge that we're looking for. But if we're bending towards each other, then we're not acting the true way we believe in. They're not acting the true way they believe in. So nothing can really develop. It makes it a fake connection. So going back to our discussions here, why did I say all this now? Because when we deal with now religious people, if we try to bend over to make sure they're not offended or displeased with the way we act, and therefore we do things that we mustn't do just in order to make them happy, that's called bending halacha over backwards in order to create the connections. That's not going to lead to anything. They're going to say to themselves, look at this weak person, look at this weak Torah. We know it's not something he should be doing, but look at that, he's helping us anyhow. They may appreciate the help, but deep inside, they're going to get the feeling that Torah is very wimpy. Or this person that is religious is very wimpy and very soft and very non-sincere with his belief. Whereas they can respect the person, who says, my belief is so-and-so, I live this in this way. I have no problem at all with the way you lead your life. It's not my business. It's something for you to develop on your own. Of course, we have a problem, but it's not something we have to tell him that and tell him in his face. We say that your life is your life, my life is my life, but please respect my views, my ideology, my religion, same as I respect yours. And that's the way also when we're confronted with a woman extending her hand to say hello to a man. Very difficult. Very, very difficult.
Corona was quite good for that.
Yeah, Corona was excellent, right?
Now,
that solved everything. Now we're going back to handshakes.
I said I still don't feel comfortable, hugging someone hello.
Right.
I didn't say a man or a woman. I just it's
in
not
general,
alive.
right?
I still don't feel like I'm. I think Corona, that was difficult to say anything good came out of Corona, but that was a good thing, that it makes those interactions like people are more accepting of someone who is restrained
a little bit. Exactly. Although that's not going to last too long.
No.
Because sooner we're going to forget the Corona totally.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we can take advantage of that point, right? I know Ram Shapira, there in Zatzal, he was a Rosh Yeshiva Merkaz Arav, and I studied there. So I once came over to him and asked him, what should I be doing? I was a young fellow then, 23, 24 years old. I asked him, how should I cope with a woman extending her hand to me? So he says, the first thing he said, and I was there then shaven, he said, first of all, grow a beard. That's gonna, then they understand not to. But then he went on and said, try to like make a small bow instead of extending your hand with your hands in the back of your back, things of that sort. If it doesn't work, then you can extend he called it a dead fish hand, meaning a very wimpy type hand, which is you're not showing anything that's enthusiasm, right? And besides all that, I don't remember if he said that or I just in the course of my life feel it's also an option. The option is actually to explain. Just to explain, you can say, out of respect to you, you're not, it's called in Hebrew, hachpatza, chefetz, that sometimes such interaction between men and women make it look like not a real sexual action, but it's almost like that. It's like to use the woman instead of respecting her truthfully for what she is and for what she stands for and her knowledge and her opinion and so that sort. It becomes a chefetz. It becomes an enjoyable being. So if you explain to the woman in a way that this is out of respect, that I appreciate you for who you are and not for any materialistical body things that come with it. So I think that's something that a woman can understand and even appreciate. because many non-religious women complain that that's what they feel. They feel many times that they're being used instead of being respected. So anyhow, this is a whole dealing with the non-religious world to make it as explain it as well as possible and make it and rationalize over these issues, and then that could prevent a lot of problems.
So many cases, I think, and it seems like the emphasis of how you've taught us that as well. If you approach people with sort of sincerity and kindness, usually, hopefully, that will be what's conveyed. Not that, I think the majority of, there's a difference between secular and anti-religious, but the majority of anti-religious people, I think, it's because they've had an experience with a religious person or a religious experience that's made them feel bad about themselves. Someone's been unkind to them, or someone's been condescending to them, or someone's looked down on them, or they feel judged, or they feel marginalized. But if I feel like the responsibility is immense, but the responsibility as a religious person to be pleasant and kind and genuine, that normally helps you avoid these not the situation, but the fallout, the offense of the situation. It's difficult always to achieve when you're busy and you don't expect it. Or, but sudden. But the genuine kindness is usually
the right way to deal with it.
The right way to deal with it, and then you've done your best. Like what can you?
Exactly. And just to mention again, the bending over in order not to insult sometimes works boomerangs the opposite direction, and they're not drawn by your personality because they see how soft and wimpy you are. Right. Very good. I totally agree to your idea. Okay. This is something that we've done similarly. This we also did. So you know what? One more. Yeah, actually one more. Exactly. We're finishing the chapter. We have a few more small situations which are repetitive to what we've done in general. So let's just do one more point here and we're finished with the chapter. So then actually, Leah, for next week, you could advertise as we said. This is not something that's strictly halacha, but it's definitely the spirit of Torah. And that is to try our best and refrain from being serviced or benefiting even on weekdays from resort areas, Luna parks, gasoline stations, all these places that are open on Shabbat. It's not purely halachic because a place that's open on Shabbat, by you using and gaining from it and paying for it on a weekday, doesn't do anything regarding Shabbat. That's not what's causing them to work on Shabbat. That's besides. They made their money on a weekday and they also want to make more money on Shabbat. Little do they know that it only takes away from their profit. But it definitely serves as misayeh. You're sort of, again, not halachically speaking, it's more the spirit of the law that you're sort of, again, acknowledging that they work on Shabbat and you don't mind. You say, okay, that doesn't bother me. Instead of it bothering us and saying, we're not going to use this place because we don't like the fact they work on Shabbat. Now, not only is that true personally, it's also as a collective. Imagine if all religious Jews don't go to a certain gasoline station, don't buy in a certain shop because they're open on Shabbat, or don't go to a certain resort area or to a certain Luna park. If we all don't go there, that's serious business effect. A serious business effect on the place. He even quotes here, Rafi Malka, that there was a place up in the north that people used to call up and say and ask the person, "Are you open on Shabbat?" He heard over and over again that people were refused to stay by them because they were open on Shabbat. And so here so many such conversations that he decided to close on Shabbat, which is beautiful. So if there's no choice, let's say on a highway and the gasoline, you're running out of gasoline, and the closest gasoline station is happens to be one that works on Shabbat, it's open on Shabbat, you can't help it. You use it because it's not really against halacha. But as much as we can to refrain, the better. especially if there's a similar type of place that of a similar function that you would like to enjoy or use that is closed on Shabbat, and definitely choose that one. Like, for example, I'll give you an example that in our community, in Olawi, we have a family called Ochayon, Amiel and Yael Ochayon. So Amiel Ami is the one who actually developed from scratch the aquakef. If you're ever there, on the Kinneret, you have these floats that people jump onto and have a lot of fun in the water. So he has a whole development there, huge and beautiful and very enjoyable. It's closed on Shabbat, which is really, really special. Baruch Hashem, I was in touch with him all about the building of it, and we discussed this matter very, very intensely and very, very deeply. And we then decided that he's not going to open it on Shabbat from the beginning of his business there, and it's doing amazingly well. Amazingly well. It's only in the summertime, because in the winter there's nothing to do there. And just in the summertime, without Shabbat, he gets tens of thousands of visitors every summer. So really, Shabbat can only be helpful keeping Shabbat. But that's an example that you can choose to go to him, to his place, instead of other water lunagat that are open on Shabbat. So specifically choose to go to such a place. And gasoline stations, we have one on Hacharoshet, the Zohar Ta'asiyah. It's called Dekel, and that's definitely with a whole nice large sign that says Sagur b'Shabbat or Lo Patuach b'Shabbat. So it's definitely, right now at least, that's a station that I know that is good to go to. Okay, so this is about it for this chapter. Zat Hashem, as of next week, Borer. We'll start a whole long chapter of Borer. Sorting.
Thank you, Rabbi. Okay. Would it be possible for you maybe to drop me an email with few catchy, like something we probably would have thought is forbidden but isn't, like mixing wise, something to draw the crowd to put on the flyer, like what the Borer is about, like just like, oh, are we allowed to do this? Can we do that?
Good idea.
If you want to find out, join the Shiur. So it's something like interesting. So if you can think of something that is either unusual or people will be like, nah, I know Borer. I've been keeping Shabbat my whole life. My mom had been keeping, my grandmother. What new can I learn? And here it's something like in their face kind of a thing. Like, oh, are you interested? Join us for next 6 weeks.
Okay, very great idea.
Thank you.
I'll do that, Belinda. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening. You're welcome. Good night.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
You're welcome.